You start.
No, you start.
No, you start.
Okay.
Oh, we already started.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. Oh, you're right. I start.
Yeah, I'd like to be right.
Okay. I owe you one. All right. Hello. Welcome back to Bloom Talks. And today we're going to talk about repairs. You know, those things that you need to do or that help to do when there's breakdown in a relationship and you would like to get back on track again. Mm-hmm. Which quite a high percentage of couples do at some point in their lives together, have the need to make a repair because there's been a breakdown. You know, probably
thousands.
Probably like 99+%. There may be a few out there who have never experienced a breakdown and have never had need for a repair, but there's not too many of them. And we're certainly not in that category.
We've had many thousands, mega thousands.
Yeah.
Lots of practice.
Right. Practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, but it does help you to put corrections in that can minimize the likelihood or the frequency of future breakdowns. So we're going to talk about some of the conditions that you want to put in to your relationship when there's a need for a repair. And one of the reasons that it's so important to do repairs, besides the fact that, you know, we're all going to need it at some point or points, and that we live in a society, in a culture in which people don't do a lot of repairs as much as they used to. You know, it used to be that, you know, if something was broken, like an appliance or something, you would try to fix it or call the repairman. But these days, the tendency is mostly for people to just do what when it breaks? Throw it away.
Throw away.
Get rid of it, because you can always replace it. And things are built in. There's this term called planned adolescence.
No.
There's this slip, planned obsolescence, where it's kind of built into it that there's going to be a breakdown and that you're probably not going to want to fix it because the fixing it is going to cost a lot of money and it may not be worth it. And so just throw it away, get another one. And you know, that same attitude, believe it or not, applies to relationships. Not that it's correct or a good attitude. It's actually a very dangerous attitude, but it is one that we have kind of brought into our lives. So we're going to talk about a very, something that's so 20th century, repairs, you know, rather than just get rid of him, get rid of her, get rid of the relationship and replace.
Mm-hmm. So if people are too quick to say this relationship is broken now, I'm going to let go of it and start fresh with a new person, I think they're missing an extraordinary opportunity, because every time there is a breakdown and a successful repair takes place, the trust gets stronger. The rapport, the closeness, the relationship becomes more sturdy. So that's the way the trust grows, is when there is a break and it's put back together again and then some.
The term that we often use to characterize what Linda's talking about is things getting stronger at the broken places.
That's right. And so to not fear the breaks, there will be disconnects, there'll be disappointments, there'll be arguments, there will be misunderstandings. They are going to happen. Charlie talked about the couples that maybe it never happens. I don't even believe they exist anywhere. There's some very harmonious couples, but even those, they have breaks. there are going to be times that no matter how hard we try to do it well, to be considerate of the other person, to be tuned into them, to meet their needs, to have our needs met, there are going to be times when we're overtired or we're hungry or we're stressed or we have a misunderstanding. There will be breakdowns. So most of you know that we did this anecdotal study with these blue ribbon relationships, the happiest couples that we could find. And this was one of the characteristics that stood out with these couples that have exemplary relationships. They are all champions of repair. It's not that they live in so much harmony that they don't have disagreements or they don't get stressed or they don't have disappointments. They do have them, but they know how to quickly put the repairs in. When we talk about repairing, usually where people go is they think about apologies and forgiveness, and those are profound repair tools. But sometimes just saying I'm sorry is not enough. Sometimes the timing has to be right for the apology. And the person may still be too defended and too protected to accept the apology. So to make sure that the timing's right, and you may not be able to just say it one time and it's repaired. It may need a number of times, and it may not be sufficient just to say I'm sorry, that you have to be specific about what I learned from this, that going forward, I think I'll be empowered to do it better. And the forgiveness is also an incredible repair tool, but the forgiveness has to happen in its own time too. You can't expect just because you apologize just now that you're going to be forgiven right away. Maybe your partner's going to wait and see that you really did learn from it and that you're not going to hurt them or wound them or disappoint them in the same old way again. That they may be reserving the privilege to forgive when they see that the lesson has really been learned. So although those are profound and important and well-utilized repair attempts, there are others. And we want to tell you about some of the ones that aren't as overt and aren't so obvious. One is the do-over. When we see that we've said something that really was off, we've done something that was off, or we made a mistake, or we forgot, we broke an agreement, to, if you mess up, fess up. Say, I'm sorry, and then could I have another chance to say this in a more refined way? And get agreement from your partner that it's okay to have breakdowns, that we can't be perfect, but that when we notice that we've done something, that made an unskillful choice, maybe blurted something out that could cause harm to the other person, then we have the privilege of having a do-over. It's very important to put the corrections in.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you look at the whole notion of what a repair is and what it does and why it's necessary and what the purpose of it is, we have to look at what is it that causes the need for a repair. And when, you know, we say, well, when there's a breakdown. So what's a breakdown? A breakdown is an interruption in the context of the relationship in which one or both partners is activated in ways that are emotionally distracting, that they're kind of possessed with feelings that prevent them from being really present right now. So it could be hurt, it could be fear, it could be anger. Something has transpired, usually between the two people, that's caused one or both of them to get triggered and to be pulled away from the prevailing sense of comfort and security, to whatever level that is in the relationship, to one of anxiety, emotional activation. And what we're looking to have happen when there is a breakdown like that is to restabilize the relationship, or possibly even bring it up to an even higher level than it was before the breakdown. And that's what we mean when we're talking about stronger at the broken places. Because when there is an interruption like that, and when one or both people get triggered and they get defensive, or they get scared, or they get angry or hurt or whatever, and they're not there, they're really not available to re-engage, because they want to put some distance between them and the other person. And that's why usually at least one of them is angry. So when something like that happens, what we want to do is we want to calm down, cool down the agitated feelings, so that each person can really speak from a more open, honest, vulnerable place, which will cause the fear level to de-escalate, and it'll cause them to feel safer. So we want to create an environment in which both people feel safe enough to become honest, to get real, to listen to each other rather than react defensively. That's what we want to have happen.
So one of the things that really helps that to happen is to take a small break. Doesn't have to be a big break, but what we're doing on the break is very important, that we're thinking about how we could repair ourselves and what we might need from the other person to repair. It could be done just in a part of a minute or in a couple minutes, using the breath to take a pause, to reflect on what just happened, so that we can be more skillful with what we say and do when after we disengage and when we re-engage. The power of intention is a mighty repair tool. I want to understand why it is that you got reactive with me in that moment.
I didn't get reactive.
What is it?
I'm not reactive.
What is it that bothered you? What sore place did I touch? This is bringing curiosity and wonder to the breakdown. It may not be a sore spot for us, but it may be a very sore spot for them. And we want to stretch into their world. We want to announce our intention. I want to know you. I want to know all about you. I want to know your tender areas as well as your strengths. I want to be careful of the places that are tender in you. Did I hit something that was painful memory for you, painful shame place, guilty place, frightened place, insecure place? And bringing that curiosity and wonder and announcing it. It's because I want to be close to you. It's because I want us to have harmony and understanding in our relationship. But I need your help to see what it is that I just banged into that got that reactivity going in you.
Yeah, and sometimes, you may say all of the things that you think need to be said. You may make your best effort to reassure that person that you really don't mean them any harm, and that you care about them, and that you want to know about them. And sometimes that may not land on them the way you want it to. Like I noticed that when you were saying all that, there's a part of me that didn't feel comfortable with it. That even though I trusted that everything that you were saying was true for you, that was part of the problem for me, that you really did mean it. And there's a part of me that didn't feel at that moment really interested in revealing all those things to you.
So that's when the timing comes in.
That's right.
Maybe you need a little bit more time to recover.
That's right.
And that your readiness, like the readiness to apologize and the readiness to forgive, the timing is so important in the repair.
So how do you find out whether this is a good time to proceed ahead? Whether that person that you're with is really ready to go to where you want to go?
And maybe you need to ask.
Maybe you need to check in.
Yeah. And
right.
our our skills in being empathic and tuning into their readiness do grow with practice. And yet, even when they're very developed, it's a good rule of thumb to ask about the other person's readiness to re-engage, readiness to reveal their tender, vulnerable part, readiness to apologize, readiness to forgive. And this has to be fluid and flexible for it to work. That's one of the most important parts about repair, is not to just say, oh, you know, that was a mistake, better luck next time, but to intuit, is there a way that we could repair it now, or do we need to settle down for a while first and then attempt to repair it a little bit later?
Yeah, so I just want to say something about that, that both people have responsibility for getting honest, for getting vulnerable, for speaking their truth in the moment in response to what's going on between the two of you at the time. So what I just did was an example of how one could, I mean, there's an infinite number of ways you can respond to somebody if you're feeling that way. But it's an example of how, if there's something that's being said to me that I'm not comfortable with, or that I'm having a response to, or that's feeling like it's activating me in some way, it's my responsibility, rather than just, you know, try to go along with whatever it is that you want from me now, or to resist you. The third option is to speak about what's coming up within me. When you said that to me, this is how I felt. I did not feel, really invited into that space. I didn't feel like that's something I was ready to do. And all too often, I think that we'll feel something like that. We'll feel some aversion, some resistance, some hesitation, some anxiety about it. And rather than acknowledge that, we'll go into either compliance or defiance. And that doesn't work.
So you're talking about truth telling. You're talking about responsible, courageous feedback about what we're experiencing.
Sometimes it does take courage, because if you speak your truth, you're being vulnerable, and you also may be saying something that's going to upset or hurt the other person's feelings.
So one of the repairs that I particularly enjoy using and have used many, many times when we've had tension between us is touch. That if I reach out to take your hand and you're receptive to that, if you reach out to take my hand and I'm usually receptive to that, if I put my hand on your heart, that can bridge the gap where the disconnect took place. Sometimes a hug. I am real touchaholic, so that's a primary love language for me. And I'm remembering when we first got together and we would have some kind of tension between us, I would ask for a hug and you wouldn't want to do that because you were afraid that it was just putting whipped cream over garbage and, covering up the problem without talking it through first. And then we would end up embracing after we had had the discussion first. My attitude back then, I still somewhat believe this, that if we were connected, then we were going to have a productive, shorter conversation, because I was just trying to get back to the connection. So you need to find out from your partner whether touch is really going to be good repair. It often is, but the timing is important about when that particular repair technique is utilized, because one person may be able to go there sooner than the other.
Yeah, this is a really good point, Linda, that you're making now. because, in these talks, we've often spoken about how complements attract each other and how introverts like me get attracted to extroverts like you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a good reason for that, and it's not a bad thing, but it sometimes can be kind of tricky because, for example, in the example that you used, when you would be distressed and what would cool you down would be touch.
Mm-hmm.
And introvert that I am, that's not what I wanted. So
you wanted time alone.
Yeah, sometimes, well, I just wanted, some
space
to be able to
privacy,
go inside and do some inner repair work.
Right.
And your repair work, your tendency is
connection,
to really look to connect as a means of repair. And I think that is important. But the timing, like you were saying, the timing is really important because you're ready to do that almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, I need to
get
to
with yourself,
inner repair. And that's not something that's going to take a long time. It's not like, oh, I need a couple of hours now to process this. I might just need, a couple of moments, to contact myself and get a little more grounded.
Mm-hmm.
Before I'm available for that. And in those old days when I didn't feel like I had the right to do that, I would kind of force myself to accommodate you.
Yeah.
And that ended badly because my heart wasn't in it, and you knew it.
No, it didn't satisfy.
It wasn't
drinking
really
salt water,
authentic. But rather than say, "Hey, I need a minute or two here before I'm going to be ready to do that,"
mm-hmm.
I wasn't either in touch enough with that need consciously, or else I didn't think it would be okay for me to do it. I didn't think that you could handle it. I thought that you might get hurt. I thought that you might get upset. I didn't want to go through that, so I just kind of sucked it up and went through the motions. And
wasn't really doing me any favors.
No, I was actually trying to spare myself some discomfort. So this is one of the ways in which the breakdowns can really be helpful in terms of bringing more authenticity and honesty
mm-hmm.
into the relationship, where you really get in touch with yourself, and then you act on, not only out of concern for your own well-being, but you're also acting out of a desire to reconnect with the other person. But you've got to do it on your own timetable.
Right. So I know that there are couples listening who have a perpetual issue, an issue where they keep having a breakdown take place. And they keep hitting that same difficult place, and they may have decided there's nothing that can be done about it, that it's an irreconcilable difference. So I want to challenge that it may be a matter of the discussion and the inquiry that's been made into that sore place, whatever it may be. It hasn't gone deep enough. There hasn't been the courage to bring up the tough subjects, the willingness to leave it in the denial zone, the feeling of frustration about we haven't gotten anywhere with this. And you may need to have a third party, maybe a friend, maybe clergy, maybe a therapist, maybe a marriage counselor, to look at it with you if there's one place where the breakdown keeps happening over and over, where the disconnect keeps happening over and over, where the violation of trust sags it down over and over. And it is intelligent and wise to get some input from outside of the couplehood if you keep hitting the same place that isn't getting repaired. Because there are ways to repair if there's a willingness on both sides. And if you've done everything you can to address that particular difficult challenge in your partnership, Be willing, and this is profoundly repairing. Get help. Don't just suffer in silence. Don't just suck it up. Don't just settle for less. Because when we learn how to be champions in the repair department, we can rise up to a higher level of well-being as an individual, each of us as individuals, and as couples. And to the degree that we keep hitting those rough places and don't learn how to do it better and how to become more proficient at repair, it's going to hold us back from having the relationship that we dream of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've mentioned this before in these talks, but the average couple that does seek out help in terms of couples counseling generally have been in a problematic situation for on average 6 years
Ugh.
before they've gotten any help. And we don't encourage people to jump in at the first sign that there's discord in the relationship. We encourage, people to really make their best effort and to get educated about how can we be most effective in dealing with our breakdowns and differences. But there's also a point at which it's necessary to really assess how successful are we being, and are we continually hitting the same kinds of breakdowns? Are we just kind of continuing to spiral down without any noticeable learning taking place? You know that real learning has taken place when the patterns are no longer getting repeated.
That's right.
That's how you know if you've learned. You don't necessarily learn by understanding why we're doing something, by understanding what would help to change this pattern. You know that you've learned when the pattern is no longer possessing you,
Mm-hmm.
when it's no longer coming up, that you put something in that has interrupted or ended that pattern. So there's a point at which it's necessary. It may be necessary. Not all couples need to, but if you hit that place, to really check in with each other and say, I think it's time that we looked outside of our relationship to straighten this out, because we're obviously missing something. The key word here is we, mm-hmm. as opposed to you're not doing it right, or it's your fault. It's this is a shared responsibility. We have this responsibility, and we also encourage people to make the agreement that if at any point one of the partners feels the need to inquire about getting some outside help, that is not questioned, that person, either person at any time, has the authority to make that call, mm-hmm. that we need to bring somebody in here.
Right. I'm aware that we're only have a minute or two left in our time together, but there's one more repair that has been so enormously effective for me that I didn't want to neglect to mention how important it is to journal. And I know some people journal all the time, but they may not necessarily journal when they're having a disconnect from their partner. that leaves them feeling uncomfortable. This was especially important, and I got in the habit of doing this when you needed your quiet contemplative time and your privacy.
Mhm.
And I had all of this feeling that I needed to express, and I couldn't express it to you.
Mhm.
Sometimes I would call a woman friend and I would express it. But when I didn't have access to anybody to talk to in my extroverted way, I could go and I could write down what I was feeling. And often I was feeling victimized, and I was feeling hurt, and that you were a jerk, and, you know, that I was being unfairly treated, that I was being ignored, or I wasn't being valued properly, or whatever the stuff was. That was often a theme. And I could keep writing until I got below the anger to the hurt and the fear. And by the time I would finish the journal entry, I was more peaceful. And then when you had your private time to reflect, and we would come back together, I had already put myself together in a way that I was constructive in the way we talked, that I could be more responsible about the part that was my own.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that would invite you to talk about the part that was your own, and then we would get connected again. And that was an important, I still use it sometimes, really important repair tool for me.
Yep.
Thank goodness nowadays, when I'm journaling for my life, it's often not about you and me. I've got other challenges these days. But I'm grateful to you for hanging in there with me, because we had a lot of places where we would cause harm to each other, and our lack of consciousness and our lack of skill in being, you know, the blue ribbon couple that we've evolved into. So I offer this to you to don't give up too easily. You know, do the do-overs. Look more deeply. Bring up the tough subjects. Do a thorough apology and forgiveness. And become champions of repair. You can do it. Going to tell them what we're going to talk about next week.
Oh, good. What are we into?
Our topic for next week is believing eyes. We'll see you then.
Bye.